We are back on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio, News Talk 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, and now in New Mexico at 1000 KKIM. Our guest by phone is the Honorable Congressman from the Simi Valley area, District 4, Tom McClintock.
Oh, actually, I got to correct you on that. I represent the 4th District, which is essentially Lake Tahoe all the way down the mountains to Yosemite.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why did I think Simi Valley?
Well, years ago, I represented a portion of Simi Valley.
You know, I'm going back to my memory just clicked back to 1988 when I worked on your campaign. You were in the Simi Valley area at that time.
Yes.
I apologize. Boy. Nothing like being a little outdated there, huh? By about 20 years.
Well, you know, when I represented that district, I used to give speeches up in Northern California, and one of the lines I would use was to say that this must be heaven, because whenever a good person disappears from my district, they seem to end up here. And one day that happened to me.
It's a little like it's a little bit like the Ten Commandments, where people are looking on top of the hill to God's country, right?
Well, it's amazing how many folks have come from Southern California up to the mountains.
Well, it's funny. I lived in Thousand Oaks when I worked on your campaign, and right now I live in Tehachapi, so it's a little bit similar. So,
right.
Going back to the election, do you think the Democrats defined us more than we defined ourselves?
Well, you know, George Will put it this way. He said, you know, the problem. In fact, I think this actually goes back to Jonas Greenberg, who made the comment that Romney spoke as a conservative, but he spoke conservatism as a second language. In other words, there was always some question as to whether he was, fully committed to the ideals that he was trying to express. I mean, he was a very, very poor candidate in his ability to attack all of the problems that Obamacare is creating, because he was responsible for a similar program in Massachusetts that's also having huge problems. So there is that. People will forgive you for disagreeing with them, but they want to at least know that you are absolutely sincere and committed in the principles that you espouse. And I think we had a little difficulty. I think he tried hard. I don't mean this as a criticism of Mitt Romney, but he was probably not the best spokesman we could have had to call this administration on the carpet.
Especially on issues like Obamacare. I'm in the insurance business, and Obamacare, from my point of view, I mean, it looks like a disaster waiting to happen. We're already seeing the repercussions already. I saw a statistic the other day where I think the number was about 55% of existing physicians in California are looking at retiring if Obamacare goes through, because there's no incentive.
It is through, and it is in the process of being implemented, and you're seeing businesses respond to that. I was reading of one major retailer who's cutting their employees all back to 28 hours, which gets them under the threshold that triggers the Obamacare requirement.
Yes.
I think we are going to have widespread unemployment as a result of, and underemployment as a result of this measure, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Now, is that a done deal? There's nothing we can do about Obamacare?
We just had an election that reaffirmed Obamacare. Remember what Lincoln said. He said, the voters are everything. If the voters get their backsides too close to the fire, they'll just have to sit on the blisters a while. It is a painful experience, but it's a learning experience, and I regret that our country is about to go through that as a result of this election.
Sure.
The only good news I can offer you is, as I said, at the end of that learning experience comes another election, and the ability to apply that newfound wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, Congressman, since the Republicans have the House and we do have the purse strings, is there any way we can somehow affect Obamacare because of the purse strings, or is it just beyond that now?
Well, again, appropriations bills cannot change the underlying legislation. That requires a separate bill. So there's some things that can be done with the appropriations process, but as I learned to my regret, is simply failing to appropriate for a bill that creates an entitlement does not allow you to reduce the expenditures. Again, Obamacare is an entitlement, and that underlying law can't be changed just by the appropriations process. It has to be changed by legislation that's adopted by both houses of the Congress and signed by the President, and it's very clear that over the next 4 years that's simply not going to happen.
It's going to be a disaster. I mean, it's amazing. And
well, it's becoming one already. Again, we're seeing people losing their health plans. I mean, this was basically sold on 3 promises, all of which turned out to be untrue. Mm-hmm. We were told it was going to bend the cost curve down. In fact, they have the audacity to call it the Affordable Care Act. The Medicare actuary issued a report last year indicating that it doesn't bend the cost curve down, it bends it up. We're going to be spending about $300 billion more as a nation because of this than we would have been without it. Secondly, we were told it was going to be good for the economy. Then the Congressional Budget Office came out and estimates that it's going to cost a net loss of about 800,000 American jobs. And again, we're seeing that happening now. And then third, we were told if you like your plan, you can keep it, and millions of Americans are finding out that that was not true.
Exactly. Our guest by phone, Congressman Tom McClintock. It's mind-boggling. Sitting here in Kern County, which is a bastion of conservatism compared to the rest of the state, we looked at this election, and to me it was a no-brainer. I could not see any way Obama could win. How did we lose this thing? I mean, it just seems so incomprehensible that we could have lost that election.
Well, again, I think that if you look at the exit polling, you realize we won the issues, but the American people simply didn't trust Republicans to carry out those positions.
So, what do we have to do in 2014 and 2016 to change that?
Well, I think we have to go back to our roots. We have to, look at the elections that we have won, and we've won handily, and they've got one thing in common: the Republican Party hewed closely to its fundamental principles of individual liberty and constitutionally limited government, and we nominated people like Ronald Reagan, who clearly meant what they said and said what they meant.
Well, and Carter brought us Reagan, so God only knows who Obama will bring us.
That's what Arthur Laffer's often pointed out. 4 years of Jimmy Carter gave us 8 years of Ronald Reagan. Just imagine what 8 years of Barack Obama will get us.
I hope you're right. But, the constituency of the country is changing. I was reading someplace that 93% of the African-American community voted for Obama. That represents about 13% of the voting public. 71% of Latinos, that represents about 10% of the voting bloc. It doesn't seem that we're hitting these people, and they tend to be more socially conservative than they are liberal. So, they're really more inclined with the Republican Party message, but yet we're not conveying it to them, and they end up voting Democrat.
Well, that's exactly right. That's the point I made in the speech that you noted earlier. I mean, working Americans of every race know instinctively that you can't borrow and spend your way rich. The Republican Party simply needs to appeal to them. Immigrants came to this country to escape the stultifying central planning and all of the corrupt bureaucracies that have utterly ravaged the economies of their home countries. They didn't come here for more of the same. They came here to get away from that. We need to appeal to them. Mm-hmm. And young people. For the first time in our history, they are facing a bleaker future than their parents enjoyed. Those are people we need to appeal to. The fact is, the very group of voters who are most damaged by Obama's policies are those who have voted for Obama. Mm-hmm. I believe with a little bit of outreach and appeal, we can reach those folks and bring them over, and that's what we have to do. Not change our positions, but convey those principles more convincingly to them.
Congressman, we had an African-American running for, I think it was Secretary of State 2 years ago. He was a great candidate, and I sat down and spent a little bit of time with him, and I lived in Marina del Rey, and I said, if I give you some advice, I think you're approaching this wrong. You got to make a diamond from your home in Marina del Rey out to the inner city and talk to those people there, because that's where you can pick up a lot of votes. Nobody ever had him do that. It's like, he was avoiding the very community that he needed to get help from, because look at this last election. The vast majority of minorities voted for Obama, where when Bush won the election, he had a very high percentage of the Latino community, and that's gone now.
First of all, not that much higher, and don't forget that Bush absolutely traduced the very principles that he said he embraced. He did exactly the opposite of what he promised to do. He increased spending much faster than we saw under Bill Clinton. In fact, Bill Clinton actually cut federal spending as a percentage of GDP. George Bush raised it massively. He presided over the biggest expansion of entitlement spending in the country's history, or at least since not since the country's history, but since the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson. He started all of the stimulus spending that's now bankrupted the country.
Yes, he did.
And he turned in what at the time they look quaint now, but at the time they were unprecedented budget deficits. So he was no Republican, and unfortunately, I think people saw those policies, associated them with the Republican Party, and the Republican Party has been dealing with the fallout ever since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree with you.
Yeah, I tell folks my beef with Barack Obama is not that he changed George Bush's policies; it's that he did not change them. He took the worst of them and doubled down on them.
And Clinton was smart enough in his second term to figure, I got to go towards the middle to be able to get anything through.
Remember after the drubbing he took in 1974, he said the era of big government is over. He made good on that. Like I said, he cut spending by a miraculous 4% of GDP. He went after entitlement spending. He ended that whole open-ended welfare system that we had at the time. He signed what amounted to the biggest capital gains tax cut in American history. He turned in the only 4 budget surpluses we've had in the last 40 years. I tell folks, if you look just at Bill Clinton's economic policies, he's not only the most Republican president we've had since Ronald Reagan, he's the only Republican president we've had since Ronald Reagan.
Congressman, we're out of time. I would love to have you back, and I really, really appreciated the time this morning. I know you had to squeeze us in. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, Marty. Thanks so much for having me.
Take care now. We'll be back in 167 hours on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio, News Talk, 1180.